They didn't just forget to invite me to my dad's 60th birthday dinner. They invited my ex, the same man who scammed me out of $50,000. And when I saw the photos online, something in me snapped. The next morning, I forwarded one email, and by sunset, everything they were hiding came crashing down. If you've ever been pushed aside by your own family, this story is your vindication. Ellie Carter stared into her half-empty cappuccino, the foam long gone cold. Across from her, Tasha was animatedly recounting a mishap at work involving a malfunctioning espresso machine and her intern's dramatic meltdown. Ellie tried to smile, to nod at the right moments, but her mind kept drifting. Something felt off. Then her phone buzzed. A new Instagram notification lit up her screen. With a reflex born of boredom and distraction, she opened it. A photo filled her phone, a beautifully set table, elegant white linens, crystal wine glasses catching warm golden light, and a glowing sign behind the group that read, "Cheers to 60 years." Ellie's heart skipped a beat. There they were, her entire family. Her mom, Diane, in one of her signature blazers, raising a glass of red. Her sister Brianna, posing perfectly with that practiced half-smile. And, at the center, her dad, Richard, looking surprised and delighted as a chocolate cake was brought to the table with a sparkler on top. All seated around a long table at Maison Delacroix, the upscale French restaurant her dad had been talking about for weeks. Ellie's fingers trembled slightly as she swiped through the carousel of photos. She wasn't in any of them, because she hadn't been invited. "Tash," she said, voice low, turning her phone toward her friend. "You need to see this." Tasha leaned over, frowning slightly. "Wait, isn't that my dad's 60th birthday dinner?" Ellie replied, forcing a flat laugh. "Apparently it happened last night." "No freaking way," Tasha muttered, snatching the phone for a closer look. "What the hell? Why didn't you?" Then her voice dropped as her eyes locked on a figure in the background. "Wait, is that Logan?" Ellie finished her voice now sharp. Logan Hayes, the man who'd once told her she was the best thing that had ever happened to him, who convinced her to loan him $50,000 for a revolutionary tech startup, only to disappear weeks later, taking the money and the lies with him. The man who ghosted her, who never looked back, and who'd left her, not just broken-hearted, but financially gutted. And now he was here, at her father's birthday dinner. Am I hallucinating? Or is Mum smiling at him like he's the damn guest of honor? Ellie asked, zooming in on one photo where Logan sat beside Brianna, arms relaxed, laughing like he owned the place. Before Tasha could respond, another notification popped up, a new text from Mom. "Just a casual dinner, sweetie. You know how these last-minute things go." Ellie's stomach turned. She stared at the message, fingers frozen. Her mum had sent it suspiciously fast, as if anticipating Ellie would see the post. And now she had an excuse ready. Just a casual dinner. Right. Ellie scrolled back to one photo, the wine bottle in the center of the table. 2015, Brunello di Montalcino, her dad's favorite. The same bottle he'd asked her to find 3 weeks ago when he called saying he wanted something really special. They'd spent almost an hour discussing different vintages, so much for casual. Ellie blinked, her throat tightening. They invited Logan, but not me. Tasha looked furious. "This is messed up. Like nuclear messed up. Why would they?" "Wait, isn't that the restaurant your dad asked you about?" "Yep," Ellie said with a bitter smile. "The one I researched for him gave him wine recommendations. He said he wanted the night to be unforgettable." guess it was. Her phone buzzed again. Brianna's newest story. Another photo, another caption. Family, where love begins and never ends. Ellie let out a laugh, hollow and disbelieving. They really went for the whole happy family aesthetic. But you're not even in it, Tasha whispered. Exactly, Ellie said. It's not a family photo if you erase one of the daughters. But I guess I've been optional for a while now. Tasha reached across the table and squeezed Ellie's hand. Have you talked to your dad? Ellie shook her head. What's the point? He'll say Mum handled the guest list, or that Brianna probably assumed I was busy. He always finds a way to step back. Neutrality is kind of his thing. Silence settled between them, heavy with everything left unsaid. Ellie looked out the cafe window, the buzz of Saturday morning life carrying on around her. People walked dogs, clutched to-go cups, laughed with friends. She felt like she was underwater. You know what the worst part is? Ellie finally said, her voice barely audible. It's not even surprising. Tasha blinked. What do you mean? I mean, this isn't the first time. It's just the loudest one. It's like the universe finally decided to make it too obvious to ignore. I've always been the daughter they call when they need something, but when it's celebration time, I'm an afterthought. Ellie's eyes drifted back to the photo of Logan and Brianna clinking glasses, her mum beaming beside them, and her father in the centre smiling like the world was perfect. For a moment, she wondered if he'd even noticed she wasn't there. I'm not even angry, she said. Just tired. Tasha nodded slowly. This isn't okay, Elle. No, Ellie agreed quietly, locking her phone. But maybe it's exactly the wake-up call I needed. She picked up her coffee, now completely cold, and took a sip anyway. Tomorrow she would decide what to do. But today she'd finally let herself feel just how deeply this hurt. The moment Ellie stepped back into her apartment, the silence hit harder than usual. Her keys clinked against the bowl on the console table, and she kicked off her shoes without much care. The city lights outside flickered across the living room walls, but Ellie barely noticed them. She dropped her bag on the couch and sat down, phone still in hand, staring at the photos she'd just seen for what felt like the 100th time. Her thumb hovered over the image of the wine bottle, the 2015 Brunello di Montalcino, centered perfectly between her father and Logan, a bottle Ellie herself had recommended when her dad had called her weeks ago asking for a special vintage for a memorable night. At the time, she'd felt a small thrill. Her dad rarely called just to chat. It had felt important, like maybe, just maybe, she mattered. And now that same bottle sat as the centerpiece of a dinner table where she'd been conveniently forgotten. She zoomed in on the photo again. Logan's smirk almost dared her to say something. Her phone buzzed. Tasha again. Tasha, you okay? Actually, stupid question, but I can come over. Ellie. No, I'm okay. Just need to think. She tossed the phone beside her and rubbed her temples. Think. Why was Logan there? Why was he invited when she wasn't? Ellie leaned forward, pulling her laptop from under the coffee table. She opened it with practiced ease, clicking through folders until she reached one named with biting sarcasm. Logan. Legal. She'd created it the week after he vanished, when the sick realization began sinking in that she'd never see that money again, that the smooth-talking man who once whispered future plans into her ear had turned her into just another mark. The folder contained everything. Screenshots of text messages, email threads, even voice memos. She hadn't looked at it in months. But now, opening it again, Ellie felt the same heat crawling up her neck. There it was, his promise. Babe, I swear as soon as the funding clears, I'll pay you back and then some. This is going to change everything. That had been 9 months ago. She clicked into another file, a bank transfer confirmation for $15,000, the first of many. The amounts had grown each time. 5,000 here, 10,000 there, always accompanied by some polished excuse. The investor needs a commitment before Monday. This prototype will blow people's minds. I just need someone who believes in me. And she had believed until he ghosted her without a trace. Ellie sat back, letting the bitterness settle like silt in her chest. Logan didn't just lie. He manipulated, charmed, and used people's trust like currency. It was his pattern. And now he was sitting beside her sister, charming her father, sipping the wine Ellie had picked out for him at a dinner she hadn't even known existed. She felt the pieces begin to shift into place, cold and precise. Logan was back, but not for reconciliation. He was back to pitch. "Of course he is," Ellie muttered. The whole scene had been familiar, him smiling broadly, soaking up attention. Logan didn't show up unless there was something to gain. He was never interested in relationships without return on investment. She opened a document in the folder titled Pattern of Behavior, a list she'd started as a kind of therapy mapping out every step Logan had taken in their relationship that now screamed scam. She'd labelled it half-jokingly back then. Now it felt like a blueprint flattery. Love bombing, financial vulnerability stories, promises of big returns, pressure to act fast, ghosting once he gets the money. Ellie stared at the 6th line. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't just about her anymore. If he was sitting at that dinner smiling across the table at her father, Logan wasn't reminiscing. He was pitching. She stood up, suddenly pacing across the living room. Her bare feet padded across the hardwood floor, but her mind was racing. She grabbed her phone and called up the restaurant's website, Maison Delacroix. Private rooms available for parties, business meetings, investor dinners. Investor. Of course. She pulled up her inbox again, this time searching Logan Hayes. Dozens of results popped up, old subject lines like follow-up on pitch deck, prototype, walk through this week, and just need a little more time, babe. A sick knot formed in her chest. Tasha's voice echoed in her mind from earlier that afternoon. Why was he there? Ellie already knew the answer. Because her father was the new target. Logan had always been strategic. Charming when he needed to be, unrelenting when he smelled money. And her father, for all his intelligence, had a blind spot the size of Texas when it came to people who looked like go-getters. Ellie stopped pacing. If Logan was planning to reel her dad into one of his half-baked ventures, there was still time to stop it. She opened a new folder on her laptop, named it for Dad, dragged in every email, every PDF, every screenshot, every bank record. She wasn't sure exactly what she'd do yet, but she was done sitting silently. She sat down again, staring at the screen. If he's trying to manipulate Dad the same way he did me, she whispered, then this time he picked the wrong Carter. The cursor blinked at the top of a new message draft. Ellie stared at it for a long time, her heart a steady thrum in her chest. She'd already titled the folder, for Dad, a digital vault of everything Logan had done. The emails begging for money, the vague promises, the fake investor decks, even a few bank statements she'd managed to recover, showing withdrawals and vanishing balances. She hadn't expected to feel this nervous, angry, sure, betrayed, always. But sitting here, about to pull down the curtain her mother and sister had so carefully drawn, she felt the weight of something much heavier finality. Once she hit send, there was no taking it back. She reread the subject line one more time. What you need to know before any investment decision. Then the body of the message. Dad, I'm not sending this to hurt you. I'm sending it because I can't stand by while Logan tries to do to you what he did to me. Attached, you'll find documentation of his pattern of financial manipulation texts, bank transfers, emails, along with notes from another former associate who experienced the same. Please read this before you make any commitments. You always told me truth matters. I'm holding you to that now. Love, Ellie. She attached the folder, took a deep breath and clicked send. Her hands were shaking. She stood up, pacing the room. Immediately she began second-guessing herself. What if Dad didn't believe her? What if he was already in too deep? Her phone buzzed. A new message. She froze. Logan, Ellie, we need to talk. You don't know what you're doing. Then another. Seriously, don't be stupid. This affects more people than you think. And then 5 minutes later, don't do something you'll regret. Her fingers clenched the phone. Regret. Was that supposed to scare her? She took a screenshot of all 3 messages and dragged them into the same folder she'd just sent her father. She wasn't going to play scared anymore. The next notification came from Brianna. What is wrong with you? Why are you trying to ruin everything? It was one dinner. Get over yourself. Then Mum is crying. Are you happy now? Ellie didn't reply. She simply forwarded those texts to herself and added them to the same file. She was documenting everything. When her phone rang, she didn't need to check the screen to know it was her mother. She debated letting it go to voicemail. Then thought, no, let's hear it. She answered, Ellie. Her mother's voice was clipped and full of disappointment. I don't even know what to say. No. Then maybe don't say anything, Ellie replied, keeping her tone neutral. That email you sent to your father, completely unnecessary, vindictive even. I sent him facts, Mum. That's all. You're exaggerating. Logan explained everything. You just misunderstood him. No, I didn't, Ellie cut in. I gave him $50,000. He disappeared. That's not a misunderstanding. That's theft. Her mother sighed like Ellie was the one being unreasonable. You've always had a flair for drama. But this is just small. Protecting Dad is small. No, hurting your family over some old breakup is. Ellie swallowed the lump forming in her throat. Thanks for making it clear where you stand. She hung up. The silence that followed was almost soothing. A small but sharp confirmation that she'd done the right thing, because no one who truly cared about her would have responded like that. Still, she couldn't stop checking her inbox every few minutes. Her dad hadn't replied. Not one word. The evening dragged on. She made dinner, but didn't eat it. Tried to read, but couldn't concentrate. Her apartment, usually a haven, felt like a pressure chamber. Every second without a response made her question everything again. Until finally, at 11:42 p.m., her phone buzzed with a new email notification. From Richard Carter. Subject, RE, what you need to know before any investment decision. There was no body text, just 4 words. We'll talk. Thank you. Ellie stared at them, rereading them again and again. Her chest tightened. She didn't know if it was relief or something else, something heavier, not the explosion she'd feared, not the denial she'd expected. Just 4 words. And for now, they were enough. Ellie was mid-sip of her second cup of coffee when her phone rang. She didn't need to check the caller ID. She knew it was coming, had been waiting for it ever since she sent the email the night before. Her father's name glowed on the screen. She answered quickly. Dad? There was no greeting, just his voice tight, restrained, barely held together. The meeting was a disaster, he said. Ellie sat up straighter. What happened? I should have seen it sooner, he muttered almost to himself. It was all there. Ellie, every red flag. I just didn't want to look Dad slow down. What exactly happened? There was a pause, then a breath. Logan showed up to the investor meeting with his usual charm, slick deck, polished pitch. Lots of talk about disruption and AI integration. Virgil asked one question, just one about regulatory licenses, and Logan started unraveling. Virgil Chandler, her dad's closest friend and longtime business advisor. If anyone could read a fraud from a mile away, it was him. He kept deflecting her, Dad continued, so Virgil pulled out a document, SEC's preliminary investigation report. I hadn't even seen it yet. Turns out they've been quietly looking into him for months. Ellie's heart skipped. There's really an investigation. Oh, there's more than that, her father said grimly. They've already flagged irregularities in at least 3 of his previous ventures, missing investor funds, fake projections, shell companies. She exhaled hard, her fingers gripping the edge of her coffee mug. And Logan? She asked quietly. Lost it, he said. He shouted at Virgil, called him a liar, accused me of betrayal, said I'd been poisoned against him by that bitter ex. Then he started throwing out threats, legal ones, personal ones. Jesus, Ellie whispered. They had to escort him out of the building. There was a silence between them. Heavy reel, Dad, she started. But he wasn't done. Your mother and Brianna were there, he said, and his voice changed lower, heavier. Ellie blinked. Wait, what? They showed up about 20 minutes in, said they were just there to support Logan, that they wanted to speak on his behalf. If there were questions, Ellie couldn't even respond. The betrayal sat like lead in her stomach. I had no idea, her father said. None. Your mother told me she'd barely been in contact with him, that she was just trying to be civil for Brianna's sake. But the way they stood beside him, like he was the victim, like you were the threat. He didn't finish the sentence. I'm sorry, Dad, Ellie said softly. I should have said something sooner about everything. No, he cut her off. You said what mattered when it mattered. You gave me a chance to see the truth before it was too late. She felt tears pricking the corners of her eyes, but held them back. I don't understand why they take his side, she murmured. After everything. Her father sighed. Brianna's still convinced he's misunderstood. She thinks the investigation is overblown, that you've turned this into some kind of vendetta. And Mum, another pause, a deeper one. She told me I should be ashamed for choosing you over family. Said I was letting you tear the family apart because I couldn't handle a little tension. Ellie bit down on her lip hard. She's been helping him for months, her father continued, almost brokenly. Emails, calls, setting up this dinner as a coincidence. She was working behind the scenes to convince me Logan was the future, that investing in him would be a legacy decision. Ellie closed her eyes. It all made sense now. Why her mother had been oddly distant over the past few months. Why Brianna had been so defensive about Logan. The birthday dinner hadn't just been a celebration. It had been a setup, a calculated play. So what happens now? She asked. I've pulled out entirely, her father said. Virgil's helping me submit a formal report to the SEC. We're cooperating fully, and as for Logan, he can sue, threaten, throw tantrums. But I'm done. Ellie let out a long breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Thank you, she whispered. There was a pause. Then something shifted in her father's voice. Something raw. No, he said. Thank you, Ellie, for standing up when no one else would. For protecting me, even when I didn't protect you. Her throat tightened. She couldn't speak. They sat in silence for a few seconds before her dad added, I'm going to the lake house, just for a few days. I need space to process your mother. She's furious. She says she's staying at the main house. Brianna's with her. Ellie nodded, even though he couldn't see her. I get it, she said. Take all the time you need. I just wanted you to know, he said softly. The truth is out. And no matter how ugly it is,
Thank you for giving me the chance to see it.
After they hung up, Ellie stood by her window watching the city move under a grey morning sky. Her phone buzzed with a new message from Logan. "You think you've won? This isn't over." She didn't respond, because maybe for him it wasn't over. But for her father, the fog was finally lifting, and that changed everything. The lake house had always been more of a backdrop than a memory. As a kid, Ellie remembered spending a few quiet weekends there with her dad. Early morning fishing trips, board games during thunderstorms, the way the air always smelled like pine and wet wood. But as she grew older, the visits became less frequent, the lake house more of a storage shed for unspoken truths. Now it was her father's new address. She stood in the gravel driveway, the crunch of her shoes echoing under grey skies. The porch light was on. Her dad opened the door before she knocked, and for the first time in a long while, he looked human. Not the polished man in dress shirts and investor meetings, but worn-in jeans, tired eyes, and an honest sadness sitting just behind his smile. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "Hey." Inside, the space was quiet, almost too quiet. The fireplace crackled weakly in the corner, and boxes sat unopened by the wall. He motioned toward the couch and they sat down, neither reaching for small talk. "She's still at the house," he finally said. "Your mom refused to leave." Ellie nodded slowly. "I figured. She doesn't think she did anything wrong," he added, as if the disbelief hadn't stopped echoing in his chest since the meeting. "Of course not," Ellie murmured. "She never does. She told me," he continued, voice low, "that everything she did organizing the dinner, encouraging Logan, was because she wanted to help me build something for the family." Ellie let out a soft, humorless laugh. Except she left out the part where she tried to do it by enabling a con artist. Her dad rubbed a hand over his face. "I keep wondering how I missed it. The calls, the emails. She even created a shared folder for Logan's investment documents using my company server." Ellie's stomach dropped. "Wait, she used your account?" He nodded. "Said it was easier than setting up a new system. She kept saying she was streamlining things." His tone darkened. "Now I think she was streamlining the con." The betrayal ran deeper than she'd imagined, and it wasn't over. Later that night, after her dad had gone to bed, Ellie sat curled on the lake house porch, wrapped in a blanket, phone glowing in her lap. That's when it happened. A ping Brianna had posted to Instagram. Ellie hesitated, then opened the app. There it was, a polished text exchange, supposedly between her and Logan. It made Ellie appear unhinged, threatening him, demanding money, saying things she had never said. The caption read, "Sometimes people twist the truth to feel powerful. I just want peace." Her stomach turned. Fake screenshots. She clicked through more stories. Brianna had even included a screen recording, zooming in and out as if to prove the texts were real. Comments flooded in, siding with her. "You deserve better." Ellie's always been jealous. Logan didn't deserve this. Ellie took a breath. No rage, no public rebuttal. Instead, she took screenshots, every post, every comment, every fake image. She saved them into a new folder. Defamation, Brianna, documentation. She wasn't fighting back on social media, she was fighting smart. Mom wasn't far behind. An hour later, Diane Carter posted to Facebook a lengthy note written in flowery, passive-aggressive prose. It breaks a mother's heart when jealousy rips through a family. "I raised both my daughters to love and support one another, but one of them chose vindictiveness over loyalty. I pray for healing. For all of us. No names, but clear enough." Ellie stared at it for a full minute. Then she clicked. Save added it to the folder and shut the app. No reply. No reaction. Let them spin their stories. She would stick to the truth. The next morning, as fog lifted off the lake, Ellie's phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. The text was short. I saw what's happening. I have proof. Lisa Logan's former business partner. Ellie's heart leapt. She replied quickly, Yes, please. Anything helps. Within the hour, her inbox flooded with PDFs, screenshots, forwarded emails, some nearly identical to the ones Ellie had received months earlier. The same promises, the same wording, the same pressure tactics. Only this time the amounts were even higher. £80, $1,000, £120,000. Another woman with a shattered bank account and a story no one had believed until now. Ellie downloaded everything and uploaded it to the cloud folder she'd shared with Virgil, her father's advisor. Then she sat back in her chair and looked out at the lake, rippling gently in the morning light. Her family was unraveling, messy and public and painful. But for the first time in a long while, she wasn't unraveling with it. She was documenting, protecting, holding the line, even if that meant standing alone. The knock on the lake house door came just after sunset. Ellie had been reading on the porch legs curled beneath her and a warm cup of tea in hand. The sound startled her, not because it was loud, but because it was unfamiliar. No one ever came here, not unannounced. She opened the door slowly, and there was Brianna. Her sister stood in a denim jacket, arms wrapped tightly around herself, like she wasn't sure if she was cold or afraid. Her makeup was minimal, her usually polished hair pulled into a loose bun that looked more accidental than styled. Ellie's first instinct was to close the door again, but she didn't. "Hi," Brianna said, voice soft. Ellie nodded once. "Hi, can we talk?" Ellie hesitated. "Here, no, I just—" Brianna looked down at her hands, fiddling with a bracelet Ellie hadn't seen in years. One she'd given her when they were kids. I think it should be somewhere neutral, somewhere real. That was new. Ellie tilted her head. "Like that cafe you used to love." "Near campus." Ellie blinked. "The one with the chalkboard tables?" Brianna nodded. "Yeah, that one?" Ellie considered it, then stepped back inside, grabbing her phone. "Tomorrow morning?" 9. "I'll be there," Brianna said. Then she turned and walked back to her car, never looking back. That night, Ellie couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the last few months like a bad movie. The betrayal, the gaslighting, the silence, the fakeness. She wasn't sure what Brianna wanted or if she even deserved to want anything, but there was something different in her face tonight, something cracked. The next morning the cafe was almost empty when Ellie arrived. The chalkboard tabletops were still there, still covered in random doodles from college students and philosophical questions written in pastel. Brianna was already waiting. She looked younger, smaller, less like the influencer version of herself, and more like the girl who used to braid Ellie's hair while they watched Saturday cartoons. Ellie sat down across from her, keeping her guard up. Brianna spoke first. "Virgil showed me the emails. The real ones." Ellie stayed silent. "They're not just about the investment. There were months of messages between Mum and Logan, planning the dinner, sharing information about your finances. Her voice cracked. She even told him which topics to bring up that would win Dad over." Ellie swallowed hard. "And you didn't know?" "I didn't want to know," Brianna said, her voice breaking. Because admitting it meant admitting. She could be wrong. That I could be wrong. She looked Ellie in the eyes. "I chose to be the villain in your story because it was easier than facing the fact that I let a fraud into our lives and defended him.
I knew something was off, but I thought you were just bitter. Ellie blinked against the sting in her eyes. Why now? She asked. Why? Believe me now. Brianna took out her phone, turned the screen toward Ellie. An email chain between their mother and Logan. The subject line, final dinner prep. Logan's talking points. She coached him like a PR manager, Brianna said. Mum wasn't neutral. She was planning it. And when I read all of it, I realized I was never protecting the family. I was protecting a lie. Silence sat between them for a long time. I'm sorry, Brianna said finally. I know it's not enough, but I need you to hear it. Ellie looked down at her hands. It's not about enough. Bri, it's about truth. I don't need a social media apology or some spin. I need real right now. I deleted everything Brianna said. All the fake screenshots. All the stories. I printed them too. In case you want to keep them for legal reasons. I don't want to hide anything anymore. Ellie exhaled slowly, then nodded. That's a start. They sat in silence again, but this time it wasn't tense. It was honest. I don't expect you to forgive me, Brianna said, voice shaking. But I'd like the chance to earn it, to show you that I see you now. Not the version Mum crafted, not the version I was jealous of you. Ellie looked up, meeting her sister's eyes, and for the first time in years she didn't see a curated image. She saw a sister, real flawed but trying, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. The wind along the lakeshore had the crispness of early fall, brisk bracing and full of things left unsaid. Ellie stood on the dock, arms folded across her chest, watching the ripples spread across the water. Her father was inside, heating up his infamous chili recipe that everyone pretended to like more than they actually did. The smell of cumin and regret floated through the screen door. She heard the gravel crunch behind her before she heard the voice. You always liked this spot? Ellie turned. Brianna stood a few feet away, her hands stuffed in her jacket pockets, a padded envelope tucked under one arm, no phone in sight, no perfectly filtered Instagram story playing in the background. Still do, Ellie said. Brianna took a few steps closer, stopping beside her. Dad's chili smells. Exactly the same. I think he might be the only person I know who's used the same spice jar since the 90s. Ellie cracked the ghost of a smile. It's mostly memory and MSG. They stood there for a while in silence, letting the breeze do the talking. Then Brianna held out the envelope. What's this? Ellie asked, taking it with hesitant fingers. Everything I faked, Brianna said. The screenshots, the posts, even the drafts. I almost published. Ellie blinked, surprised by the weight of it. You printed them, I figured. If I could manipulate things digitally, the least I could do was hand you the receipts in real life. Her voice softened. If you ever want to take legal action, I wouldn't blame you. You'd win. Ellie looked down at the envelope again. It felt heavier than it should have, like it carried all the years they'd grown apart. I'm not going to sue you. Bri? I know, Brianna said, but I needed to say it anyway. They sat down on the edge of the dock, feet dangling above the calm water. For a moment it felt like they were kids again before the layers of perfection and pressure, before they'd learned to perform instead of just be. I posted something, Brianna said after a long pause. This morning, Ellie arched a brow. Another cryptic quote about forgiveness. No real stuff. She pulled out her phone and handed it over. Ellie read the caption on the screen. I owe my sister the truth. I let pride, image, and fear convince me she was the problem when I was part of the machinery that hurt her.
I'm not asking for followers or sympathy. I'm asking for accountability. From myself, starting now. No hashtags, no aesthetic photo, just a black screen and white text. It was raw, unfiltered, and more importantly, it didn't ask for applause. Ellie nodded slowly and handed the phone back. "Thank you," she said. "It means more than you probably think." Brianna swallowed hard. "I want to be someone who tells the truth, not just reposts it." They were quiet again until the screen door creaked open behind them. "You girls gonna let this chili get cold?" their father called. They looked at each other, a shared grimace passing between them. "Think he'll notice if we order a pizza instead?" Brianna whispered. "He's still using a landline." Ellie replied. "He probably thinks Uber Eats is a rideshare app for horses." They both laughed. Real, unguarded laughter. And for the first time in months, maybe years, it felt like something was truly shifting. Inside the lake house smelled like old furniture and fresh beginnings. Over dinner, their father brought out sketches he'd started for converting the old boathouse into an art studio. Ellie felt her breath catch when he said, "It's yours if you want it. A place to create without judgment." She looked over at Brianna, who gave her a small, encouraging nod. Later, while washing dishes side by side, Brianna nudged her gently. "You gonna say yes?" Ellie dried a plate, staring out at the moonlight flickering on the lake. "I think I already did." They both smiled. Their mother's absence hung heavy, but not as an open wound. More like a scar they'd stopped pretending wasn't there. "Do you think she'll ever change?" Brianna asked. Ellie shook her head. "I don't know. But I know we can." And maybe that was the point. Not fixing the past, but refusing to let it define their future. That night, as they sat on the porch, wrapped in separate blankets, but sharing the same silence, Ellie felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace, not the performative kind. The kind born from truth, from broken pieces picked up and held carefully, not glued back together for display, but cherished for what they were. Real. The news broke just after sunrise. Ellie was pouring her first cup of coffee when her phone lit up with a dozen notifications, texts, alerts, news, pings, and one message from Virgil with the subject line, "He's in custody." She opened it. Heart thudding. Logan Hayes had been arrested on multiple federal charges: wire fraud, securities, fraud, conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The SEC's investigation had become a full-blown takedown. The words Ponzi scheme and multi-million-dollar scam splashed across the headlines like digital sirens. She sat down slowly, her coffee forgotten. It was done, but the aftermath was just beginning. By mid-morning, her mother had already taken to Facebook. Diane Carter's post featured an old photo of Logan shaking hands with a smiling executive captioned, "Sometimes the justice system gets it wrong. We must stand by those we love, especially when the world turns against them. Join me in supporting Logan's legal fund. Truth will prevail." Below it was a fundraiser link. The goal, $150,000 for his defense team. Ellie stared at it in disbelief. Not even a flicker of hesitation. No apology, no acknowledgement, just another performance. "Wow," Brianna muttered when Ellie showed her. She really doubled down. Ellie nodded. She's not defending him. She's defending her story. But this time, no one rallied. The fundraiser stalled at $307 after 2 days. The comments were a mix of disbelief and anger. Most were from strangers, former followers of Brianna's who had since learned the truth. The tide had turned, and Diane Carter was still clinging to the rocks. Back at the lake house, things moved at their own pace. Their father filed for divorce that same week. I should have done this years ago, he told them quietly. But I kept telling myself it would get better, that if I just kept the peace. He trailed off, then looked around at the open windows and the smell of sawdust drifting in from the boathouse. Peace isn't the same as silence. I know that now. Ellie and Brianna didn't ask for details. They didn't need to. The damage was already visible cracks that had long been wallpapered over, now laid bare. Instead, they focused on the boathouse. It had been dormant for years, just a space to store fishing rods and forgotten projects. But their father had a vision now, an art studio for Ellie, a quiet space where she could paint again without apology, without judgment. The three of them spent the next week clearing out old junk, scrubbing walls, repainting faded beams. It was physical work, but healing in a way Ellie hadn't expected. With each stroke of paint, each hammered nail, it felt like they were rebuilding more than a space. They were rebuilding themselves. One evening, while sorting through boxes, Brianna held up a crumpled sketch pad. "Is this yours?" Ellie took it carefully. The paper had yellowed with time, but the drawings were unmistakably hers. Birds, trees, dreamlike boats adrift in moonlight. She smiled faintly. "I used to sneak out here and draw for hours. Mum called it a waste of time. Said I needed to focus on practical things like you did." Brianna looked down. "Yeah. Practical things like curated feeds and career-perfect boyfriends." Ellie gave her a look. Okay, Brianna added with a grin. Some of it was fun, but a lot of it was fake. They sat on the dock that night, watching the water reflect the stars. The air was cool but not cold. There was comfort in the stillness. "You really think Mom believes she's right?" Brianna asked. Ellie didn't answer right away. "I think she needs to believe it. Because if she admits Logan was a scam, then she has to admit she helped him hurt us. And if she admits that..." Ellie trailed off. "She has to admit she picked him over her daughters," Brianna finished softly. Ellie nodded. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed with a new message. Another Facebook post from their mother. "I forgive those who wronged me, even if they never ask for forgiveness. The world sees what it wants. I see the truth. No names, no direct accusations, just another veiled performance. Ellie didn't screenshot it this time. She didn't need to. The truth didn't need her to fight for it anymore. It was already winning." The settlement offer arrived in Ellie's inbox on a quiet Tuesday morning. It was neat, polished, full of legal language and formal disclaimers. An attempt at closure that fit into a spreadsheet. Logan's frozen assets were being divided among verified victims. She was entitled to a significant payout, more than the original $50K plus damages. All she had to do was sign. She stared at the document for a long time. Her cursor hovered over the review and sign button. Everything in her body said this was justice, financial reparation, a tangible win. But her heart felt clear, because this wasn't about money anymore. Not really. It was about voice. Truth. The years she'd spent silenced under the weight of other people's stories. Her mother's carefully constructed illusions, Brianna's curated performances, Logan's empty promises. Ellie leaned back in her chair. She thought about the lake house, about repainting beams with her dad, about Brianna handing her that envelope full of confessions, about late-night talks by the dock, not to rehash old wounds, but to breathe into new ones. She clicked decline. Then she typed 2 lines to her lawyer. "I won't be accepting any settlement. Truth is worth more than money." And she meant it. Within a week, Ellie's inbox began to flood with messages, not legal ones, but personal. Some were from strangers, Others from former classmates, distant relatives, even anonymous usernames she didn't recognize. All of them said the same thing in different words. Your story gave me courage. I believed no one would care if I spoke up, but then I read what you did. Thank you for being loud when silence felt safer. Her story had spread not as scandal, but as signal, a beacon to anyone who had once been silenced, manipulated or gaslit into second-guessing their own reality. Ellie hadn't meant for it to go viral, but somehow the right people found it. Not because it was messy, but because it was honest. She didn't post a follow-up, no tell-all interviews, no takedown video. She simply kept creating. In the converted boathouse studio, the walls were now lined with sketches. Some were quiet birds, waves moons. Others were raw and abstract tangled lines of grief and defiance. She didn't care who understood them. They weren't for everyone. They were for her. One morning, while setting up for an art workshop with local kids, her dad poked his head in. "There's a new comment on that article about Logan," he said. Ellie rolled her eyes. "Let me guess. Someone blaming his downfall on cancel culture," he chuckled. "No, this one's different. Says, the only person who acted with integrity from the start was the woman he tried to erase." "That's you, Elle." She paused, brush in hand. "I never wanted to be remembered for this," she said. "I know," he said gently, "but you will be. And not just for what you exposed, but for what you reclaimed that evening as the sun slipped behind the trees and the lake shimmered like melted gold." Ellie sat on the porch with Brianna, sipping tea. Brianna was scrolling through her phone, but not with the same addict's grip she'd once had. Her following had shrunk thousands, had unfollowed when she posted the truth. She'd lost brand deals, PR gigs, and more than a little ego, but she had gained something Ellie hadn't seen in her sister in years. Peace. "Do you ever think," Brianna asked quietly, "that if they had just invited you to dinner, none of this would have happened?" Ellie looked out at the water. "Yes," she said. "If they had included me, I probably would have smiled through it, sat across from Logan, played the part, stayed quiet." Brianna nodded. "I think about that a lot." "I don't," Ellie replied. "Not anymore." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Ellie added, "They thought uninviting me from the table was punishment." She set down her cup and smiled. Not a bitter one, but a smile rooted in something solid. "But it was the first invitation I ever received," she said softly, "to come back to myself." Brianna looked at her eyes glassy. "That's beautiful." Ellie shrugged. "It's true." The night deepened. Crickets stirred, the lake stilled. Ellie leaned back in her chair, surrounded by people who had finally stopped performing, who had learned like she had, that peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of truth. And she was ready more than ever, not just to move on, but to begin.